District 26, we have our Democratic candidate, Joe Garcia. No party affiliation, is Jose Peixoto. That's what I've done so far. Please forgive me. And we have the incumbent, Congressman David Rivera, and he is a Republican. We're going to start off with Larry Conn-Medina.
First, thanks for coming south. Congressman, let's just get right to the 600-pound gorilla in this room here. A lot of media organizations have reported on federal investigations into you, from the dog trap to the Democratic primary. You continually deny you are the subject of an investigation of any kind. How do the people here square that?
Thank you for the question. First of all, two answers. Number one, no federal agency or federal authority has ever stated or confirmed that I'm under investigation for anything, and so I categorically rebuff all of the false allegations that have been reported in the media.
Do you think the people just accept that?
No.
Can you get your political messages across with that on your shoulders?
Well, it's one of the most important political messages, I think, in this campaign is about jobs. I think this campaign is all about jobs in the economy, jobs, jobs, jobs. One of the ways I certainly get my political message across is if you go to jobs.gop.gov. At this website, you'll be able to see precisely the message of economic empowerment and economic development that I've been campaigning on. This will tell you at this website, jobs.gop.gov, exactly what I've been doing the last almost 2 years as your congressman to create jobs and to improve the economy. Everything from improving free trade to voting for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution to always voting for a budget, a federal budget, that is less than it was previously. As you all know, we have a $16 trillion national debt. We've had over 8% unemployment for over 40 months in this country. That's more since the Great Depression. Unprecedented unemployment. People are hurting out there. I don't think there's any voter that I've encountered in this election that doesn't know someone or have a relative or a neighbor or a friend who has someone that has lost their job or lost their home or in jeopardy of losing their job or losing their home. So that's why I've been focused on that message, and that's why I gave you the succinct answer that I gave you.
Congressman, a follow-up to that question. Did you in any way attempt to influence the election, the Democratic primary involving your opponent Joe Garcia and Justin Lamar Sturmatt? Did you attempt in any way to influence that election?
As I just stated, and that's been reported, allegations in the media as well, I categorically reject every single false allegation that has been made in the media, including
that election. Did you attempt yes or no? Yes or no?
Including the one you just mentioned. I categorically reject it.
You reject false allegations, but did you attempt, yes or no, did you attempt to influence that election?
As you know, that's one of the allegations that have been made. I categorically deny it. No.
Mr. Garcia, you've been spending some time in the Florida Keys the last couple months, and based on your research, your anecdotal research, and perhaps conversations you've had with your constituents here, can you tell me what you think the three most pressing issues are in the Florida Keys?
Jobs, getting the economy working again. But when you look at it in Keys context, right, because every place is unique. One of the areas is catastrophic insurance. That's something we've got to work on. And the firm is doing a lot of work, but you've got to put this into context, right? When you look at what's going on in the Midwest with the drought, most of those farmers are going to be okay. They're going to be affected. They're not going to have bumper years, but they have crop insurance, which is put together by the federal government. We should look at something similar with Florida Keys, where we can create a pool or create the conditions where you can spread risk across the national basis, particularly when you look at the architectural and design investments that Keys residents have made throughout the years, which make their structures much safer than and other structures across the state of Florida. So I think that's tremendously important. The second one is bringing federal funds down. When you think about people paying $6,000 and $7,000 water bills because we haven't been able to bring enough federal funds down, I'll give you a classic example. Talk about jobs. I mentioned the other day this on the Billy show. Dade County's water system. Very good water system, but now it's starting to have problems because we haven't been able to invest, federal funds haven't been coming in, and there's a moratorium on building in Coconut Grove. Think about this, you can't have a bathroom, you can't change a bathroom, literally you stop job growth. This is a place that has restaurants. Over 40% of Dade County's water system came from federal funds. And so part of the job that a congressperson does, besides making sure that the bad legislation through and they promote the interest in the area, is also to bring home tax dollars to Florida. Tax dollars that we pay, and Florida is a net payer, not a recipient, and so we have to act very aggressively to get those funds. And I believe that infrastructure projects like that, we can invest, obviously make the economy better and more valuable.
It's a question for Joe, and how do you respond to the voter who says the Democrats have been in control of the Senate for the past 4 years, the Democrats have been in control of the White House for the past 4 years, 2 of the last 4 years the Democrats were in charge of Congress, the House of Representatives. The debt has increased to $6.5 trillion, the budget deficit is $1.1 trillion, unemployment is at 8%, 50 million Americans are on food stamps, the vast millennial was killed. How do you respond to the voter who says maybe it's time to elect a congressperson that's in a party different than the president?
You've had a very good person that's a congressperson different than the president. That's what you've had. Question, I think about problems, and the great problem and frustration when Congress has, and Congress is controlled by the Republicans, as an 11% approval rating, is that we're having a discussion that is completely meaningless to the average voter. This whole idea that there are partisan problems. There aren't partisan problems, there are only problems. You know, when I hire a mechanic to fix my car, I don't ask my mechanic if he's a Republican or a Democrat. I simply ask him to fix the problem at hand. You know, when I charter a boat, put me on the fish. I could care less what you are. And that's the problem. As a nation, we look at these things and we fail to understand that the most important thing that Congress has to do is stand up and be counted for the people of their community. Try to make sure you fight for the issues that are important to your community. And also be a source for working with local mayors, local elected officials. You look at, for example, what's going on with Roosevelt Boulevard, a project that's going to take over 800 days. You're going to lose businesses that are going to disappear, tax revenue that's not going to be collected. So what you use a congressperson in those cases for is to find alternative ways, to see if you can work with the government, because that's what a congressperson does. Yeah, you're in Washington, but you're also a source representing a much broader community, a much broader landscape. And you try to find solutions. You know, I had a call from a local commissioner on this issue, and I called the former Secretary of Transportation, and we talked about this issue and how important it is. I think that's what elected officials should do. That's what congressmen should be in the business of doing, is resolving problems.
I'd like to go on with both questions for candidates if I can.
Well, I'm sure we'll get.
Okay, well,
Don't worry.
this is for all three of you, so we can start with you. I had put on Facebook the other day saying I'm going to be here doing this and ask people what they want me to ask you. And one of them was, I can travel to China, Vietnam, and other countries around the world, but can't travel 90 miles south. Why does the Miami Cuban community have such a lock on foreign policy in that area?
Thank you for that question. First of all, I want to say thank you to Hometown again to put this wonderful job here, and thank you guys to stay here. And I want to tell you guys one thing: this counter is so in bad shape right now. Look at 80% of the other politicians already take off for the parties. How much people care about the communities. I think we should stay here and at least in every single candidate, because every single position is very important to us. And I have nice people here. One of my ideas about the Cuban, the last 22 years, the person we have represent us, she spent 90% of the time to talk about Cuban and Venezuela. I'm sorry, we're not in Cuba or Venezuela. We in the United States of America, we have plenty of problems here to resolve. I don't think we should be talking about Castro, or my opponent, Mr. Rivera, wants to stop people to go to Cuba. My opponent, Joe Garcia, don't want the drilling in oil. We have to look at ourselves for the problems we have here. If we stop people to go to Cuba, we just left with the dictators we have over there. They have a dictator's law. You cannot go nowhere. You cannot leave the country. What we doing to people here is the same here. You cannot go to Cuba because this is a free country. If I have money, I can go any place I want. Even in Cuba, even Taiwan, whatever. Why Cuba? It's because the laws and all the legislation we had to regulate the Cubans are out of date. They've been in power for almost more than 48 years. It's time to change.
Thank you for the question. Let me just say that whoever sent that question, I know it wasn't you, you read it off of Facebook, but that was phrased in an offensive manner. And I'll tell you why. It's not the Miami Cubans that control U.S. policy vis-a-vis Cuba. That would be like criticizing, for example, Jewish Americans for caring about U.S.-Israeli relationships. I think that would be offensive to say that about the Jewish American community. It would be like saying gun owners control gun policy or farmers control agriculture policy. The fact of the matter is they care. They care about those issues. Peanut farmers in Georgia care about policies related to peanuts. Tobacco growers in North Carolina care about policies related to tobacco. Jewish Americans care about policies related to issues. That's good. That's a good thing. That people who care about certain issues actually care enough, as the Constitution says, to petition their government. That's what this country is all about. So the reason Cubans care so much about this particular issue, a few items. The fact of the matter is Cuba is a terrorist nation. Cuba is officially on the list of State Department sponsors of terrorism. Countries that want to harm America. Countries that want to kill Americans. Terrorists. Cuba right now is harboring fugitives from U.S. justice, including cop killers, drug traffickers, people that killed state troopers in America being harbored by the Castro dictatorship. And the fact of the matter is there is travel to Cuba. There is license to travel to Cuba. More people travel to Cuba in the United States than many countries in the world. We have more commercial relations with Cuba than many countries in the world, but it's licensed. It's regulated. And that's because of the aforementioned status of Cuba as a rogue terrorist regime. What we should be doing is talking more about reforming the Cuban government and promoting democracy than criticizing our own policies.
It's always good to listen to a Republican arguing in favor of more regulation. Here's the reality. We have to isolate the regime, but expand our contacts with the Cuban people. I think that's a policy that the president began. I think it's a policy that's made sense because it's expanded travel and direct relationship. I think we have to look at the purposeful travel provisions and continue, but there is no question that part of what David said is absolutely right. This is a dictatorship. It has been in power over 52 years. My family was a direct victim of that. It is why I was born in the United States. Now, that said, we also have to have a real and rational relationship with this part of the world. And that makes sense too. That's why I'm against offshore drilling in Florida. And I stood for it. These are policies that make sense. Mr. Rivera is against offshore. He's for offshore drilling in Florida, but somehow he's against it in Cuba. Now, how you enforce that, I have no idea. But the reality is we have to have a policy that makes sense so that when things happen, we can protect our national interest. And I believe that the current policy is working, and we simply have to continue that policy as we do it.
Joe Garcia. I call this the elephant in the room, but I don't want to be partisan. But the question I asked your opponent, Congressman Rivera, did he in any way attempt to influence the primary election involving yourself and Justin Lamar Sturman?
There is a federal grand jury investigation that's going on. That's not me who's saying it. That is most of the press in South Florida and the nation. That is going on. That's a matter of fact. It has nothing to do with me. And for me to speak on an ongoing federal investigation has very little to do with what will happen in this election. Clearly, what we need to do is turn the page and move forward. I think we would rather someone who serves Congress, who spends 100% of their time representing the people who live in the district, than 90% of the time defending themselves from a series of charges, a very serious series of charges.
Am I the only one candidate having no charge against the other? Am I the only one leaving this district?
It's Peixoto, right? Peixoto, okay. So that begs the question, and I want you to take this a long way, but I want you to tell us who you are and where you live and why you're running in this race.
Thank you very much for that question. I'm Jose Peixoto, running against two wonderful gentlemen here, both are Cuban American. I'm a Brazilian American. Why I mention that? Because I'm very frustrated. The last 22 years I live in this community and I voted. They represented us. She spent more time talking about Cuban. Please, we are in the United States of America. Every single Cuban arriving in this country today, they are not long political exiles, they are economic exiles. Why we don't treat them equal like we treat every single immigrant? Behind most of the Cuban politicians in South Florida today are big medical money. The company in Miami called Leon Medical Center in February this year sold just the list of the clients to Humana Insurance for $2.3 billion. And they only been in the market for 15 years. Do you think that's a clear money behind that business? How many of you guys here have a business and have no way close to that amount of money profit? We have to look at, unfortunately, when we say Cuban, that means everybody else. We have a lot of good Cuban people. We have two next to us here. But we have to change the policies with the Cuban. We have to change this. We have a law they call wet feet and dry feet. That's the most inhumane law you can think about. You have a person in Cuba, you tell him, if you escape the Fidel Castro guards, and you jump into the water, 1 minute I'll be able to finish. If you jump into the ocean, and you swim or get in the rock, you escape from the sharks in the bad weather in the Straits of Florida, you come to Florida shore, you escape for the Coast Guard, we give you a green card. That's
I'm going to follow up. You did not answer my question. I want to know about you.
30 seconds.
You have 30 seconds to tell me who you are and what your relationship to the Florida Keys is.
I've lived in Florida Keys for 23 years. I love this community. I've been working hard around Key Largo area with the Masons and the Shrine. And I've been seeing a lot of problems we have here because, again, our representative before never show up here for meetings, never have an office open, and we are people. We voted, we pay taxes. We need people to care about us. We have laws and regulations come from Washington and Tallahassee all the time without the guys come over here and see our progress.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a question for both David and Joe. And David, we'll start with you. And I'm going to put you both on the spot with a very specific question. And Joe, you touched on this earlier. The National Flood Insurance Program has proven to be a success. Would either of you support legislation to to create a national windstorm insurance program similar to the National Flood Insurance Program.
Absolutely, and I've been an advocate of that since I was in Tallahassee for 8 years working specifically on this issue. I traveled to the southeastern states to push this issue. Many of those states, of course, don't want to pool with Florida because Florida has the most coastal exposure on the entire planet in terms of actual value, more than Japan or Australia or California and so forth. So it's a very difficult issue. But people like Ileana Ros-Lehtinen have been pushing this for years, many members of Congress. So let me just very quickly say to my friend Jose, I know Ileana Ros-Lehtinen very well. She's a friend of mine. I work with her. She cares about a lot more than Cuba and Venezuela. She's got a really big job right now as Foreign Affairs Chair. She cares about the entire world and national security issues and foreign relations. She's represented Monroe County very well with distinction and has given a lot of attention to Monroe County. And also, with Bill's question earlier about getting involved in candidacies, I hope Bill and others here will Google the words Rolly Arrojo and Joe Garcia, because he's a candidate that Joe Garcia actually did put as a ringer in the 2010 election, and was proven that his campaign manager was business partners with this gentleman. He threw him in there as a Tea Party candidate to try to take Republican votes away from my candidacy. It didn't work, but if you're so interested in candidates helping other candidates, Google the word Rolly Arrojo. And in terms of investigations, the fact of the matter is, I hope we wouldn't be talking about each other, we're talking about our own platforms. But since Mr. Garcia chose to talk about that, the only candidate on this dais who we know is under federal investigation is Joe Garcia. And after when we're done, I'll show you all the documents demonstrating that for 2 years, Mr. Garcia has been under federal investigation for violating federal laws. And here I'll show you all the documentation. Bill, I'll give it to you as well. But absolutely, I do support a national windstorm coverage.
Let me begin by answering your question, yes. And I've met with Congressman Ron Klein, former Congressman Ron Klein, who actually passed it out of the House. And I thought it was a very comprehensive piece of legislation and it worked well. It got it out of the House, it got installed in the Senate, but I think it serves as a basis to move forward. It had bipartisan support on 14. Let me just answer this very quickly. The allegations that Mr. Rivera just made, they have not only been denied by myself, and I deny them categorically and not under investigation, but more importantly, they've been investigated by 4 different journalists at the Miami Herald. They've been investigated by Channel 10. I don't know how much more you can do. And the very letter he points out is the same letter that he has on his record. It's a reconciliation letter that goes with the Federal Election Commission, which is par for the course. Almost every politician who's involved in fundraising sooner or later gets one of these letters to reconcile their funds. I am not under federal investigation. If you call the Federal Elections Commission and ask them, they will state I'm not under investigation.
Guys, we have a few more minutes left, but since it's our house, I'm going to put some rules in. From the panelists, issues. And from you guys, issues. If anybody talks about any more stuff, we'll be done for the night. Because we've spent half our time talking about charges. So let's start here and talk about stuff that affects all of us. I don't care what it is. Just no more charges.
As you all know, this for all 3 of you, our 2 biggest industries here are fishing and tourism. And increasingly, what's known as catch shares in the fishing industry is taking hold on the federal level. That's where specific fishermen or companies get allotted a certain amount of a fishery harvest for any season. A lot of people say that up in New England, that's putting a lot of people out of business, or it's consolidating the commercial fishing among a small group of big companies. A, are you aware of this, and B, what's your position on it?
Who's it to? It's for all 3. Start with Joe. We're going to do 1 minute question. Really, let's keep it moving.
I'm aware that it occurs, that it's part of the things that they try to do to save certain industries. Look, I moved quickly I think it was about 4 weeks ago when you had the yellowtail incident and spoke to a lot of the commercial fishermen on this issue. Look, we have to be sensible. I mean, I'm proud to be endorsed by most of the major environmental groups, but I also am proud to be endorsed by working captains and fishermen in the area, as well as by farmers in Homestead. The truth is, we have to work together to preserve these resources. They're not going to be solved by one person acting or government alone, but we've got to work in conjunction. And one of the wonderful things about this congressional seat is that we put all the lower Everglades and Florida Keys together for the first time in a while. I think that creates an ability to move legislation to create a table where people can work on these issues in conjunction.
There is a law or legislation was done by the United Nations 10 years ago. That was in the summit in Brazil. That's one that's getting power right now. They start regulating all the fisheries here, the fresh water and the salt water. They call 21 something else. We have to be very careful there as a congressman. We have to stop. The United Nations have no rights to regulate our waters. Fresh and salt water, the Everglades, the key stations. That's what we have to look forward to stop those regulations.
There's only one candidate running in this office that's worked on this issue, and that's me. I've been working on the cashier issues every day that I've been in Congress, and Leanna Ross-Layton has been working on that issue a lot as well. I've been working very closely with Congressman Ross-Layton's office and with the fishermen associations here in Monroe County, which is why they are supporting my candidacy. Because they understand that as a member of the Natural Resources Committee, we've never had, before I got on the Natural Resources Committee, we hadn't had a member from Florida on that committee. And I specifically got on that committee on natural resources to deal with issues like this, the catch share issue, which comes right through my committee. And we've been very successful so far in fending off the threat to jobs in the Keys, to jobs in Monroe County that this issue represents. Of course, the fishing industry, as you know, is very important. So again, as I've worked for the last year and a half plus on this issue, I hope to continue to work on it. I think the fishermen understand that I very much care about it, and they would galvanize support throughout Congress, whether with Leanna Ross-Layton as the congressman from down here or when she moves further north. I will be committed to this issue.
Congressman, correct me if I'm wrong, you were opposed to the DREAM Act when it was first proposed, but one of your ads recently shows you with a young girl talking to her about her parents, and you say it's the American dream. How do you rationalize those two viewpoints?
Well, I think you're misinformed on the first position. What I stated when I was running in 2010, when the DREAM Act failed to pass the 111 Congress, what I said is what we need to do is build consensus and comprehensive immigration reform that can be bipartisan and that can be bicameral. And that's exactly what I've done as a member of Congress. I have sponsored 2 pieces of legislation that build upon the concepts of the DREAM Act, but I think do so in a way that can bring large-scale support to the issue of, number one, allowing young people who are here and who came here at a very young age, through no fault of their own, have no documentation, to serve in the military honorably. And I think if somebody is willing to die for America, the least we can do is give them a chance at life in America. And the second, that's called the ARMS Act that I have sponsored to help these young people. And the second piece of legislation is the STARS Act for young people that achieve higher education accomplishments and demonstrate a work history as well, to give them a chance at achieving documentation in this country as well. They both receive bipartisan support, bicameral support, and that's the way we need to go.
Actually, my question was about the STARS and the ARMS Act, so you caught me off guard. What about these young people who, through no fault of their own, come into this country and otherwise do not choose to serve in the military, or who are not seeking higher educational opportunities? How would you provide for them? And I'll direct the same question, 1 minute apiece, to each candidate.
I'd love to answer that. I'm an immigrant myself. How are you going to take a 14, 15 years old kid and give him a right to stay here? They need the support of the family to be a good student, to support themselves with money. Who's going to pay their bill if they got home and the father and the mother was deported? Because their family is not legal. They are illegal, supposed to. Because when the father and mother is legal, their kids are automatically get the legal citizen or a green card. I don't believe the DREAM Act is what we need. We need to look if the students are good enough, they are very high level student because they come from a very strong family. We should be looking at the family situation, if they're hard-working people, if they obey the laws of this country, if they learn at least the basic English, if they pay taxes, if they have a low record here and where they come from, they should be allowed to have their case looked by the immigration, not just the children. Because, again, 14 years old kid here without support money, you and I have to pay for it.
Well, let me begin by saying quickly that the DREAM Act solves the problem. STARS and what do you call it, the ARMS Act does not. It's sort of like, a very small portion of the bigger problem. Look, I'm for comprehensive immigration reform. Almost 60% of Americans believe in it. What we need to do is make sure they learn English, pay their back taxes, deport people who commit crimes, and can stand on the back of the line and get this solved. It's something that we need for our country. It's something that we need for people to retire at some point, and it's part of our labor force, and then we need a program that works. And America does this particularly well. It's something we're very good at. But what we need to do is work on a bipartisan basis to find solutions.
DREAM Act doesn't have the votes in Congress to pass. We need a solution now. I think the Civil Rights Act can be instructive in our approach to reform. The Civil Rights Act was not, the Civil Rights Movement was not achieved with one single bill. You had the 1957 Civil Rights Act, the 64 Voting Rights Act, housing, employment, discrimination. It was many pieces of legislation over 10 or 15 years during the Civil Rights Movement. We need to start somewhere. We need to put our foot, get our foot in this door and make sure we can have a solution now for these kids. These kids are here now. They need to be able to study, they need to be able to work, they need to be able to drive, we need to find them some access to the American dream. They deserve it, they contributed immensely. We've had people that are valedictorians, that are graduating, that deserve a chance at the American dream. We've got to start somewhere. So I said, the votes don't exist for the overall comprehensive immigration reform. Let's find out where the support does exist. Where can we find bipartisan, bicameral support to achieve something for these deserving kids? Thank you.
That's the last question.
Last question is a philosophical question, and Jose will start with you, and then Joe, and then David. And under what circumstances, if ever, should the United States taxpayer bail out a private business?
We see already what we go through. We should never back up anybody else. You failed, I'm sorry. You can start again in your own. But I don't have to pay for your faults. I don't have to pay for your mistakes. And this country learned that the last 4 or 5 years when we started all the banks, the auto industry. I don't think that's right because look how big is our debt right now. It's because we bail out those people. And we have to start at home, that's right. When we are failing in our homes, what's happened to us? Bankrupts shouldn't let those companies go bankrupt. And new ones will come out and start over again. I've been in the United States for 27 years. The largest airline when I come to the United States was Pan-American. They're gone. They're history. We have American airline right now. Eastern Airlines was the largest airline 10 years ago. They're gone. We still have American Airlines, one of the best and the largest airline in the world.
The circumstance is clear. When it's in the national interest. I believe what the president did with General Motors and the car companies was necessary. It worked. We're #1 again. That's a reality. We can't argue it. And if we would have let that happen, if we would have let that industry collapse, we would have lost the suppliers, we would have lost the supply chain, and we would have lost the single most important emblematic industry in this country. And now we're #1 again. It's a perfect example of when government should act.
I don't think any business should ever be considered too big to fail in America. I don't think Chrysler invented the minivan because of the bailout. They invented it because of innovation and because the incentivizing factor of the market forces. Same thing with General Motors. I think Chrysler would have survived by inventing the minivan, General Motors as well. In terms of the philosophical question that you posed, I don't think there's ever a time that some business, as you mentioned, Eastern Airlines or others, are too big to fail. Taxpayer money should not be going to bail out businesses, just as it won't ever go to bail out your small businesses here in Monroe County, in the fishing industry, in the tourism industry, in the hospitality industry. No one's going to come bail you out. I know a lot of people ask me when they see all these bailouts, where's my bailout? It doesn't exist for you all. It shouldn't exist for them either.
Call me out if we need.
Thank you, guys.